up guys, welcome back to another video. This is Matt Vaughan here for CardsChat. I am going to be probably reviewing a couple of hands using this software called GTOx. This is not unique software by any chance, but it is what I sort of prefer to review live hands. So not an endorsement in any way, but I think that if you are a live player, it's a very good tool to use. I'm going to start out by walking you through how to input a manual hand. They do have ways to input online hands, and that's basically a highly just automatic. You can paste in what you got out of the a poker tracker or a Hold'em Manager 3 kind of thing. And that software is going to basically just run and parse the hand as is. But if you are playing live poker, obviously it's a little bit different. You're going to basically start in this upload hand section, click manual, and now you're going to input all of your information. In the hand that I'm going to start reviewing first, we're looking at 9 max, and the effective stack was 46 big blinds. The ante was actually a big blind ante, but we're 9-handed, so we can approximate an ante at 11% of the big blind, because if there were 9 players putting in 11%, that would be 99%, so it's close enough. We could even put a couple extra digits there if we want, I think. And so we're going to then select who the hero is by clicking one of these. And for this hand, I was in the cutoff. And no, I'm sorry, I was in the big blind for this hand. Let's get that right. And my hand, we can see we can select here, was whatever it was. It was ace-3 offsuit. The suits are not super important. And now we don't know what the other player had, so we're not going to plug that in. We're just going to hit apply. If we don't select cards for the hero, it's going to tell us to go back. So hit apply. And then we need the action of the hand, which I have in a notepad over here. So I'm going to consult my handy dandy notepad here. What's a little bit tricky about plugging this in for a live hand is you obviously don't know off the top of your head necessarily what the bets were in big blinds, and everything in here is bets placed in big blinds. So the first bet here is to 2.1K at the 400, 800, 800 level, but that's actually going to come out to right around 2.5 bigs. I'm going to call it 2.5 because I think that's close enough and it's a little bit easier. And I'm sorry, it actually wasn't under the gun that opened, so I need to start out by not saying that. So it's going to be a fold from under the gun, fold from under the gun 1, fold from under the gun 2, and then the low jack is the opener to 2.5 big blinds. Hijack folds, cutoff folds, buy-in folds, and like most solver tools, you're going to have to keep it to heads up. So this is a heads up pot where I end up defending this hand in the big blind, so I make the call. And the flop comes out ace queen 7 with 2 spades. Just going to say ace queen 7. And then we have to go on to the next action. I ended up checking from out of position. He bets 4K, which is 5 big blinds. And a pretty big bet, by the way. And I end up making the call. The turn is an offsuit 8. So we call it the 8 of hearts. Not the suits actually doesn't matter as long as it's offsuit. It didn't bring in the front door draw. It didn't bring in a back door draw. And I check once again in the big blind. He now bets 11K, which again is quite large. And I actually need to pull out my calculator for this one. 11,000 divided by 800 is 13.75 big blinds. And that's a bet. And again, another call. And then I had the river marked as a brick. I don't remember exactly what the card was. It could have been like, you know, an offsuit 4 or something like that. It's definitely offsuit. So we're just gonna say it's a 4. Brings in 5-6, but is otherwise a brick. 5-6 of spades is probably the only relevant combo there. So we'll put that in. I check once again in the big blind, and the low jack now jams for the remaining stack. And I ended up calling against a very capable player. My theory now is that the jam, calling off the jam was a pretty significant mistake, but that the turn was close and that the flop is pretty standard against this size. Now, there's going to be a lot that we can really do with this, so I'm going to let this run, and then we can go on to the next piece of it. But the thing we have to do now is review the automated pre-flop ranges that it's going to give us. So as you can see, it's giving us predefined ranges that are reasonably wide. Don't mind my dog in the background. She's just hanging out. And we might have to tweak some of these. Sometimes players that you're up against will not play these ranges. Like, I'm a little skeptical of players opening king 6 suited from the low jack in general in live poker. But this is a pretty strong pro, so I expect his ranges to be pretty decent. And then from here, like, I can certainly tweak my own range. Like, I probably don't actually defend these very bad offsuit hands. King 5 offsuit, sure. That's probably 3-bet some of the time. Same with some of these ones that are partial frequencies. I think this is generally like okay. I probably don't have ace queen suited ever, so I'm just going to remove that. I probably realistically 3-bet it. But the rest of this looks pretty fine to me, so I'm just going to kind of let it go as is. And, you know, if it's a little bit off, that's okay. More so want to like be tweaking these ranges if somebody's just a gigantic, you know, they're just like a massive lag or something, like they just play way too many hands very aggressively or something like that. Anything where we really know concretely that it's different, we'll want to just keep an eye on that. But in general, if you're playing against good players, or at least like players who have solid starting ranges, this is a good starting point. So I'm going to click Analyze Post Flop, and now it's going to move into my hand section where it's added to the solve queue. So it can direct us there, which is what I'm going to go to. It's processed, which basically means they know that this hand needs to be reviewed, but it hasn't been run yet. It's probably in the queue or whatever here. And we're just going to have to sit and wait for a little while. Now, thing to keep in mind is this is running on cloud computing, so I don't need a strong computer to run this particular software. Some solvers you do, but you can also do more with certain kinds of solvers where you can traverse the whole game tree. There's a whole lot that goes into that. But basically, because I don't need to run on my computer, I can just run and do something else, or I can just stay on my computer and do something else. I could input more hands and they'll just queue up. And as long as, you know, whatever subscription I have is like covers enough of the hands, I can input as many as I want. So I'm clicking refresh here, and it's probably not going to be done. Keep in mind that one thing that defines how long it's going to take is not just how many people are waiting in front of you to process hands. It also matters how deep stacked the hand is, because the more chips that are behind, typically the more bet sizes the solver considers at least, and the longer it's going to take to run because there's more potential actions. Take, for example, a situation where you're only 10 big blinds effective, there's a raise and a call, and the SPR is like 1.5 or whatever. There's only so many options there. Like, yeah, sometimes it's going to go check on the flop and you get to the turn of the river, but a lot of times you'll just get it all in on the flop. Like, that'll happen pretty frequently. Whereas if you're 500 big, well, you can't even go 500 big blinds effective, but if you're 200 big blinds effective, you're never really going to be all in on the flop. If you are, it's just like some very low frequency thing, much lower frequency than if you were like 10 big blinds. So there's a lot more possibilities of scenarios, different bet size going in, and more bets and raises going in that are possible. So it just multiplies the size of the game tree pretty substantially, and that leads to a longer time to solve it. But a lot of solves will just take several minutes, which is another very cool feature of this, where if I was running it on my computer, it would definitely take longer. So literally, as I've been speaking about this, it's moved from processed to solving, which means it hit the top of the queue, and now it's working on solving it. From here, it'll probably only take, several minutes, since this is not like a supremely deep stacked hand or anything like that. And the open size was actually reasonably big as well. All right, so as you can see, we are done here with the solve. It's showing up as solved now. So we can look at the hand, we can download a hand file. Obviously, we can delete it, or we can jump into a detailed report. So we're going to take a look at this one a little closer. We're not going to go through like every single piece of this software. Just kind of going to get you guys started. But over here in the top left, you're going to see the out of position players range that was pre-flop. And you're going to be able to like do things like select and see how the information basically narrows down where in the range it is and so on. It's going to be easier to do that when we select individual combos. Same thing for in position on the right, and same functionality is going to happen. You'll notice that left and right is also out of position and in position down below as well. Over here is a pretty complicated table, but there is a bunch of stuff that is not going to be super relevant to us. We're just going to kind of see the approximate approach and go from there. And then we'll get a little bit deeper probably on later streets. You can see stuff like the EV regret, which basically just means like if we were to do something else, what would that be? And also what would be the outcome in terms of EV. So like it's clearly much, much worse to jam all in with our range than it would be to just check it. And obviously betting smaller would be better than jamming because we'd be jamming things like, 4-3 suited and things like that. So over here on the right, which it might be a little hard for you guys to see. Actually, let me do this. I'll just make myself smaller. You can see the action nodes. So basically this is going to be everything that you could do and that the solver would do. And you can see that basically here we're checking 100% of range. Let me unselect ace 10 suited here as well. And then over here is an equity distribution graph. So you can see basically who has an equity advantage, who has a nut advantage. All of that is very visually easy to see. And then down in the bottom right, we have this thing called blocker and unblocker scores, which we're not going to get into right now. In the very bottom, you can see the specific combos and what they each prefer to do and the distribution of those. And so here, it's pretty straightforward on the flop. As we discussed, ace queen 7, defending out of the big blind. We're just checking range, and that's what I ended up doing. So that's what I'm allowed to click. Again, in this software, you can't choose an action that was not taken in the hand as it was given. So if I had bet, I wouldn't be able to select check. And if I had checked, I'm not allowed to select bet. But we can see that imposition is doing quite a bit of betting on this board. In fact, essentially range betting would be fine. The EV regret of taking a specific action would be significant, but not for betting the whole range. You would just, have different betting sizes. The frequency they do bet the most often, according to this, is this roughly large size, three quarters, but not, all the way to pot. And then if we select ace 10 suited, we can see that they are taking, ace 10 suited is just a hand that could be in range here. I'm not saying that they would definitely do it, but they would bet, let's see, this size is a 3/4, and they are choosing this size most of the time with a hand like ace 10 suited. If we look at a hand like, say, king jack suited, it's a little more nuanced, but again, this size is chosen quite a bit by the solver. So let's select what this player did and then move on to our response. I imagine we're supposed to basically always call with this hand and never do anything else. Seems like check raising would be a little outrageous, but you can see that we do quite a bit of folding. Against the larger size, we're allowed to do this especially. And we do some calling and very little raising. I would probably simplify and never check raise, but maybe that's just me. If we look over here at ace 9 suited, and more specifically the exact hand we have, sorry, ace 9, why do I keep saying ace 9 suited? I think that's in a different hand. Ace 3 offsuit, we can see that we do quite a bit of calling, although the ace of hearts and 3 of diamonds specifically is calling about 82.5% of the time. The fact that it's not pure calling this hand to this size makes me very concerned that I punted, maybe as early as the turn. So this is very interesting to see, but we can see that some of these hands actually are in fact doing a little bit of raising, which I certainly did not anticipate. I did not think a hand like ace 3 would be doing much raising. Certainly if we deselect this and look at the distribution of our range, we do have a fair bit of top pair here. We have 15% of the time or so. So it is a big part of our range. Nothing is also a big part of our range. So this is very interesting to see that most of our raising does come from sets, 2 pair, but then a little bit from like these weaker top pairs, it looks like. You can see them selected here, and this is basically highlighting the strategy of each of those combos. So very cool stuff to see that ace 3 offsuit is actually one of the combos that ends up getting raised at the highest frequency of our hands, ace jack offsuit being the largest. All right, so moving on from this flop call, let's go into the turn card. We're going to move a little bit faster now since you guys are kind of starting to get the gist of it. You can see we check range here again. Makes sense. The turn 8 doesn't change a whole lot here. So we just check range. And you can see our opponent does bet at this size quite a bit. And a hand like ace 10 suited picks this size primarily. And if we look at bluffs, we can see that their draws, right, are open-ended, flush draws, gut shots. You can see they actually do a lot of betting with like third pair and weaker pairs. So if we like look at third pair, they're picking jacks, 10s, and 9s to actually do a lot of betting. And king 8, jack 8, 10, 8, 9, 8 are doing a lot of betting as well. And it seems likely that this is because these hands will block straights on the river and can barrel off, as well as sometimes just like make two pair or trips. And then of course some of these will be flush draws as well. You can see the flush draws are actually even betting even bigger sizes at some frequency. They just have so much equity. It kind of makes sense. And then if we get away from the third pair and look at just their weak pairs, you can see king 7 suited, kind of similar concept. Like if a jack or a 10 comes, it's blocking Broadway. And then 7-6 suited, not sure exactly the mentality here. Maybe it can block 5-6 when it comes in, I suppose. And it's also just so weak. When your range is pretty strong, you kind of have to reach for these weak hands, I suppose, to make bluffs. So he does end up betting. And with ace 3 offsuit, I sort of figured that perhaps we are supposed to go away at this point, given the amount of possibility of check raising flop with these like very weak ace X hands. I can't imagine that. Oh, we call still all the time. All right, so I was just totally wrong. Basically, ace 3 is good enough. Ace 3 is good enough here. Every single combo of ace 3 that we get here with is continuing. And this is why it's good to run spots like this. At the time, I felt like the turn was kind of close, but it turns out if we don't check raise flop, if we just call the flop with ace 3, it ends up being a very standard call on turn. So that's what we do here. And then the river, I believe, is a 4. And you can see, again, we check range. We're facing a pretty polarized range, and now we are not polarized ourselves, so we are just checking for sure. And with only really one size available, we can see our opponent is supposed to bet the all-in size with essentially almost their whole range. And you can see that they very often have at least top pair, 17%, 24%. They have 24% of the time that they have at least, two pair. And top pair, they have another 37% of the time. So we're looking at like 60% of their range is like top pair. This is really why they're allowed to just bet such a high frequency. And you can see that their bluffs are coming from just basically everything that is not an ace. So here we have the bet come in, and ace 3 offsuit, we can see, is actually mixing quite a bit. So the exact combo I had was, I believe, ace of hearts, 3 of diamonds. That's right. And it is mostly calling, but not by a ton. So my instincts were pretty right on river in the sense that this was very close. There was options, but it's not exactly a fun spot to be in when your opponent's range is so heavily weighted towards top pair or better, and you've got a very weak top pair. So I hope this video was helpful. I know we kind of rushed through at the end. I had a little bit of technical difficulties, so some re-recording going on. This has been Matt Vaughan with CardsChat, and I will see you guys in another video very soon.